everybody. It's time to gear up for another energy shift. This one, I think, is going to be pleasant, but we shall see. We're looking at the window between March 22nd and April 4th. And in my opinion, the Penumbral Lunar Eclipse energy and those archetypes, there's a mix of archetypes in there, and we're going to talk all about this. But during that window, that overall archetype, I think, will be dominant through that whole period. We're looking at a couple of weeks in that window. Oops, forgot to put that up there again. We're looking at episode 6. So here we go. Here's our playbook. We're going to be talking about the actual charts, the list of all the influences that we're going to delineate, and then we'll look at some of these pictures and see how those match up. We'll also look at the yin-yang meter, and because we're looking at a lunar eclipse, I'm going to show you what the path of the moon actually looks like. But first, we're going to talk about the things that we need to talk about. Here's the influences. I already talked about the period, but the window that we're looking... Oh, first of all, I guess this is the most important part. And it's showing. We're in daylight time because on the 10th of March, we're doing that stupid time change thing. But on the 25th is when the Penumbral Lunar Eclipse occurs. Actually start on the 24th, depending on where you are in the world. It'll go through midnight, last about 4.5 hours. But here's the window that the entire energy is good for, 322 to 44. And the Penumbral Lunar Eclipse is the main player in that energy during that period. So we start our window, our energetic window, with Mars going into Pisces. And that's on the 22nd of March in the evening. And what this does is creates a mutable water signature. What that means is, I'm going to show you real quick. Down here, we have planets, 4 planets in water signs, and we have 4 planets in mutable signs. And so that makes us the background, even though not the majority of planets are in Pisces, it makes the backdrop signature a very Piscean type of energy. So that's how we gather that. And so in this window, Pisces signature is pronounced. It's subtle, but powerful in the backdrop. And then on the 24th, late 11:53 p.m., depending on where you're at, this is the central daylight time. And then all the way into the wee hours of the 25th, 4 o'clock, 4:30, is this full worm moon at 5 degrees Libra, 7 minutes. Eclipse is going to last actually more than 4.5 hours, just a little bit more than that. And then again, also, we talked about the mutable water is subtle, but the eclipse itself is subtle because that's what the penumbral is. I'll show you that here in a second. In addition, we're looking at not a lot of squares like we've been used to in these past surf reports, these several months now, just all these contentious energies. Well, really, it abounds with sextiles during this period. There's an absence of squares. There's an absence of tension and pressure. And then finally, we end our window on the 4th of April. And that's when Venus goes into Aries. The sun at that time is directly over the North Node in Aries. And Mercury retrograde is almost out the back end of Aries, but turns retrograde. So he's going to stay in Aries. So you can see where the next energy is going towards. It's a very Aries oriented. And then on the 8th, we have that new moon solar eclipse, total solar eclipse. And so that'll be in energy shift 7. All right. So where do we go now? Well, let me give you the overview of the chart so you can see it for your own eyes. This is right in the middle of the window. This is when moon is exactly across from the sun. So, but you're in the shadow. The moon is going to be in the Earth's shadow, the penumbral, couple hours before, a couple hours after. So that's how you get this big window. And then you can see this sun contraparallel the moon on the opposite side of the zodiac means we have an eclipse. All right. So what are we going to see with this? Well, the Penumbral Lunar Eclipse. Now let's talk about some astronomy as you go outside and look for this. Obviously, this is the tropical system. So if you are able to see any constellations, you'll verify that the moon will not be in Libra according to the sidereal astrology. So we're going with the energies or the influence in this energy shift report, which means we're going to be using tropical. The moon is and will be in Libra at the time of the eclipse, tropical system. If the moon is above the horizon where you are, you can see the March 24th, 25th Penumbral Lunar Eclipse. Here's the list of places. So parts of Antarctica. Is anybody down there in Antarctica? We have the western half of Africa, Western Europe, Atlantic Ocean, the Americas, North and South. We have the Pacific Ocean, Japan, and the eastern half of Australia. We'll see a deep penumbral lunar eclipse. It'll begin at 4:53 UTC on March 25th. So that's in Eastern time frame, Eastern Daylight Time. That's going to be 12:53 a.m. And the greatest eclipse occurs at 7:12 UTC. That's at 3:12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'm going to throw all these different kind of time zones, and I apologize, but I just want to make sure everybody's covered. The greatest eclipse is when, basically at this time, this is when the moon is in the deepest, darkest sections, but with a penumbral, as I'm going to show you, it doesn't really get into those dark umbral shadows. So you're not going to see the dark bite taken out of the moon. Instead, it's just going to be a subtle darkened shading of the moon. And these experts who estimate what it's going to look like, they say that the majority of people won't even notice anything happening, even though it's in the penumbral shadow. And let me show you real quick what this path looks like. That's as much as I can zoom in on this. This is inthesky.org. Credit goes to them. And you can go there and put your location in, and it will show you what you will or are expected to see. So you can just see barely a shadow. And this, where my pointer is where the umbral shadow is of the Earth, and it never really quite touches it. So this is why it's called the Penumbral Lunar Eclipse. All right. So now, what does this mean considering everything that we have here? Well, one archetype we can look at is seeing beyond the shadows. The lunar orb confronts the eclipse subtle shading. One metaphor pictures Libra, the diplomat, holding the balanced scales with an obscuring aura. So the light being obscured from the sun, being eclipsed by the earth. And so we might perceive relationships in half light and softens habituated perspectives. What does that feel like for most people? Well, there's sort of a positive and a negative. On the positive side, you might be gaining fresh views of partnerships, seeing both sides of the issue, perceiving justice and all the shades of gray thereof. Normally we're sort of idealistic and into right and wrong or this binary thinking. compromising despite ambiguities, mediating with imperfect data. Excellent. But on the negative side, we might see a lot more passive aggressive behavior. We might see disagreements coming to the surface, imbalance emerging briefly. Might see petty arguments or nitpicking. We might see resentments revealing momentarily, or a failure just to see other people's perspectives. And that is the archetype and the energies of just the eclipse in Libra. But what happens, remember, we also have that Piscean backdrop. So how does that affect things? Well, when we combine the Piscean mystic with the Libra mediator, we get intuitive blends with Libra's balanced harmony. A novel archetype emerges called the compassionate advocate. So the metaphor envisions that this figure is like a defense attorney, guided by empathic insight into sides, committed to justice through representation of every soul, with devotion akin to a saint. Or we might see a spiritual counselor who sees each person's struggles as a shared human condition. We're trying to meld the Libra eclipse with the Piscean backdrop. And what we get is perceiving underlying oneness amid conflict and greeting all who suffer with open-hearted care. All right, so let's go through our pictures. We might even see what looks like a savior energy. So let's go ahead and read the full delineation here. I'm calling it the mystical mediator. It's the Piscean backdrop with the mediator of the eclipse, the full moon. The energy of this period is akin to the savior archetype. We have a backdrop signature of Pisces with very little contentious squares, inconjuncts, and even opposition, just that one opposition with the full moon. So energetically easy, flowing, opportunistic. We have the sextiles. We have to include those. And then on the 25th, an extra strong Libra full moon dominates people's attentions globally. In other words, it's extra strong. It's an extra strong full moon because it's an eclipse. Archetypically, it's the defense attorney who is advocating for the unheard, the ignored, and the hurting. Justice comes because the fiery and easily offended Aries sun is eclipsed by the earth. This brings an energetic imbalance. Imbalance. Yes, the eclipse is an imbalance, and here's the irony. It's in Libra, so it's imbalanced in support of more balance. Ugh, that can get wonky. So, but with the eclipse, because the energy and the particles of the sun are being eclipsed, you have a heavy imbalance weighted towards strong justice, strong harmony, and ironically, true balance. That's part of what Libra does. And it's uninhibited. The Libra eclipse and its effects swell from the compassion, oneness, and intuition of the Piscean backdrop to all souls everywhere. The intuitive folks will confirm the whispers in the background that resound: Piscean idealism, connection, dreams, oneness, togetherness that are expressed and melded into the advocacy space, making it look and feel like the savior energy. Keep in mind that the elites know this energy too and may try to use it for their ends. So watch out. Yeah, watch out for false saviors, if you will. Some people talking Antichrist. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing where you get tricked into believing that this person is there to help you when they're really just try to control you. I'm not saying that's going to happen, okay? But I'm just saying, watch out for, and I'll show you, we'll talk a little bit about right now we'll talk about how to avoid the fallacies of deifying or demonizing. If you're not careful, you're just listening to what I just said, you might accidentally demonize anybody, including a legit person who's trying to help humanity. So what we don't want to do is deify someone, and kind of the halo effect is there. Is no matter what they say, you just follow what they're saying and you don't use any discretion, and you just like they're a god or they're an angel or I got to do everything they say. That's how you easily get manipulated. But the opposite is also true. What if they're there to help and you've demonized someone? No matter what they say, you're not going to listen to any message whatsoever. So either one is equally problematic, and there are a couple things that you can do during this period to make sure that you're following the people who are in your best interest. First and foremost, attune to your intuition. You have to learn to be aware of it, what the signals are. You also have to learn to interpret it, and then you also have to learn to trust it. Some of you have decades of practice with that, but others of you are very new at this. And so this takes a lot of practice. I would practice now if you're watching this early, hopefully, and get ready for this period of time from March 22nd to the 4th, and be looking for the people who are trying to be maybe the savior or the archetype of the defense attorney that's going to be all of our voices. We don't know if it's going to be good or bad. So we don't want to be deifying or demonizing. We're going to use our intuition, first of all. Second of all, let's not just assume that once someone is in one person's a basket, let's say of good or helpful, that now everything they say is helpful. Don't fall into that. That's the deifying basket. So the second technique is to don't shoot the messenger. Look at the message itself every single time. Just because you start to trust someone who seems like they have power and can help us doesn't mean that everything they say is going to be helpful, right? So always look at the message. Try to avoid labeling or judging the messenger, okay? Especially when they're asking you to do something, right? Make sure then you back it up. Once you say, so you have the intuition, that's number one. Number two is you verify and validate the message. And let's say that you like the message, so you're about ready to carry out the activity that's asked of you. Now the backup is to make sure that activity matches your value set. Make sure that there's no conflicts of interest in your morality and your values. If it's in alignment with your intuition, you've analyzed the message, and you have validated that this behavior that you're about to carry out with or agree to is in alignment with your values, I think we've got a good savior there, or good recommendation or validation of a positive outcome. All right. And then finally, the yin-yang meter. You can see it's heavily weighted towards the yin. I mean, all the attention is on the moon. That's yin. We have the backdrop is Pisces. That's yin. So why don't we have a full-blown yin? Well, because I think what we just talked about is a little bit of mental acuity that you need to have during this period, which is a little bit of yang. So you need to use a little bit of effort for those three things that we talked about in order to navigate this period of time. Other than that, I think it's a largely yin period. You definitely don't want to be just sitting around waiting, right? That would be total yin, just to relax and wait for the savior archetype to show up. And then boom, we get whisked off to the new earth and everything's fine. I think there is a little bit of yang that we need to do just to make sure you're not falling into the false prophet or the false defense attorney or the person who's not really in our interest, not really but trying to act like they're advocating. Okay. I don't want to put you in fear. I want you to be ready, right? So from March 22nd to April 4th, be looking for the mystical mediator. Be looking for the defense attorney who is saying they're advocating for all of us, and then use the procedures in order to do not fall into any traps. Okay? Is that sufficient? Did we do good work here? I hope so. Thanks all for watching, and I am already starting to get ready for ES7. That'll be next week. So, guys, take care. We'll see you on Wednesdays for the Surf Report. Namaste.